Hey everyone, we're Red Donkey Projections. I'm Eric and we have Lucas as always.
Hey everyone.
So what we're going to be talking about today is Joe Biden's vice presidential picks, which in this case we have Amy Klobuchar, Kamala Harris, Belle Demings, Stacey Abrams, and Elizabeth Warren. And using a website called OurProgress, we're going to be looking at how much damage or how much help they provide to maps like this one. If you see a red, it does not necessarily mean that it's going to the Republicans. It just means that it's damaging Joe Biden's chance of winning and vice versa.
Yep. Just some extra information here. These maps were all made by Our Progress, slightly before the George Floyd protests. I don't think they took it into account. Actually, no. They made it slightly after on the 28th of May, but I don't believe they took into account those protests here. So it is a little bit outdated. We apologize for that, but we couldn't really find any other sources.
Yeah.
With that being said, let's get right into it. One more other thing is that we'll be rating each candidate on a scale of 1 to 10 about how much we believe Joe Biden should pick them and how much they're actually helping Joe Biden overall. So the first candidate we have here is Amy Klobuchar. Amy Klobuchar is from the state of Minnesota. She is a moderate senator from the state of Minnesota. She ran for president in 2020. Obviously, this is after the George Floyd protests happened, because quite honestly, if this was made after the protests, almost every state would be red. The only state that might not be red is her home state of Minnesota. Even that, I think, will also probably be red as well. Anyways, no surprise here that she is helping in the Midwest region where Minnesota is. We have Minnesota here, deepest in blue, obviously because this is her home state, and candidates usually do well in their home state because Amy Klobuchar is relatively well-known and popular, at least before the protests. Essentially, she does a lot of help in these states bordering Minnesota as well. Just some more information on Amy Klobuchar that's important to keep note of. Before serving as the senator from Minnesota, she used to be the attorney general of the state of Minnesota, and she failed to prosecute Derek Chauvin, who would eventually kill George Floyd, and this would cause her chances of winning or being appointed and selected for the vice presidency to be severely damaged. So now getting back to this map here. Again, no surprise here that we see North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, Illinois, Ohio. These are states that are near Klobuchar's home state. Now, if you look closely, you see that Wisconsin, Michigan isn't really, going for her. One of the reasons why Klobuchar doesn't really help that much overall, not even talking about just Wisconsin and Michigan, is that she performs well with older voters. Now, if you know, Joe Biden also performs very well with older voters. That is not a problem that is not a weakness that Joe Biden needs. So Amy Klobuchar isn't necessarily helping him that much as a result of that. So obviously she is not helping Joe Biden here. The overall percentage, according to Our Progress, is Joe Biden has a 74% chance of winning before choosing Amy Klobuchar, but only has a 69% chance after. That is a 5% decrease. That is pretty damaging to his campaign. It's going to be even more than that, especially after George Floyd protests and the killing. Eric, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, it's just surprising to see how even the whole entire East Coast, which tends to be solid Democratic states, are damaged because of Amy Klobuchar. And that comes to show just everything outside of her little epicenter of the Midwest and Minnesota is completely just, everyone just hates on Amy Klobuchar. And Pennsylvania too, which we usually give tilt to Joe Biden, that just comes to show how much a vice presidential pick can completely change that, because Pennsylvania is already a battleground state and we give it to tilt. And if this damages Pennsylvania, it can go completely toss-up or even go to Donald Trump. And same thing with New York and a lot of other states, and Florida as well.
Right. Although Florida is a lot less damaging. It is important to take note that people don't usually really vote on the vice presidential candidate. That's kind of like the secondary factor there. They usually vote for the person on the top of the ballot, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, but it is important to take note of the vice presidents as well. And it's very interesting to look at this to see how she's not helping in states that Joe Biden needs. He needs his blue wall. He needs Pennsylvania. He needs Michigan. He needs Wisconsin. And these are damaging. This is a pretty dark red color. It's not like a light red like Florida. This is pretty damaging to his campaign if he chooses her. So on a scale of 1 to 10, before the protests, I give Amy Klobuchar 3 for helping. And if Joe Biden should choose her after the protests, honestly, it's a 1. I don't think it's going to completely damage his campaign.
Yep.
Yes, Amy Klobuchar did try to kind of salvage her campaign by kind of being the one that announced that all the officers were charged and that Derek Chauvin's charge was upgraded. However,
the damage was already done.
Yeah, the damage was already done. 1. It's a 1.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're going to now head to our next VP possible candidate. This is Kamala Harris. How about Eric discusses this one?
Yeah, so Kamala Harris is a senator from California. And you see how we can start from the West. California, most of the states in the West are being helped because of her. Nevada, Utah, Arizona, which is battleground state, so that's important, and New Mexico and Colorado, even Texas. So all of those states are being helped if Joe Biden chooses Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is a moderate, so is Joe Biden, so that's not a problem. Their views align quite similarly, not completely. What's interesting to see is how Oregon and Washington are hurted because of Kamala Harris. This may not be the reason why, but on a separate note, Kamala Harris does carry some baggage in terms of police brutality. She used to usually take the side of police officers, and that's exactly what the people are protesting right now. So it's not as damaging as what happened with Amy Klobuchar, but it's a little bit significant. And maybe that's why those states are being impacted.
Mm-hmm. I do think we should probably give some more information here. Kamala Harris used to also be the Attorney General of the state of California, and she failed to. She usually took the side of police officers during the prosecutions. As a result, this will cause her some issues here after the George Floyd protests. Overall, it's better than Amy Klobuchar. Definitely needs that help. Joe Biden definitely needs that help here in Arizona from her. As considering she's from California, bordering right next to Arizona, very, very important.
The next thing that I think we should point out is how this is much improvement in terms of the blue wall area. Every single state here, it goes in favor for Joe Biden, unlike here where, for Amy Klobuchar, where Wisconsin and Michigan and even Pennsylvania does hurt Joe Biden's campaign. Here, Kamala Harris does maintain the support, and especially for Pennsylvania, which is a battleground state, does help. Interesting to see how some of the East Coast states are not being helped if Biden chooses Harris. Maybe that's because they just want Elizabeth Warren to be the candidate. She is from that New England area, so maybe that's why. Is there
definitely
anything
possible
else?
Yeah, I do think I want to point out Georgia is going more blue. It is also important to mention that Kamala Harris is a person of color. She is mixed race. She is half African American and half Indian American. Now, why is this important? Because this might draw in voters, especially those important African American voters, such as in Georgia. Although, will this provide a lot of help to Joe Biden? Not really. And that is already because he is pretty good at getting those African-American voters out to vote him. That's why we don't see Georgia as solidly blue as we might expect. But it is still important to note that because it might get those African American voters out, and that will obviously be helping Joe Biden's situation. Although maybe not that many African American voters, obviously due to the issue with her always siding with the not always siding, but mostly siding with the police. But I still believe that it will definitely be at least a little bit of help to Joe Biden's campaign. Now let's give this a rating. Eric, why don't you start first here? 1 to 10.
Yes. So it's definitely, as I said before, it's definitely an improvement from before. I would give this, again, Kamala Harris is definitely one of the better picks for Joe Biden. I would probably give this a 6 to 7 out of 10. Other than a bit of New England, and a bit of the West Coast with Washington and Oregon, she does seem to help for the most part.
Now, my opinion from looking at this map, I do think this is pretty good as well. 6, I think a 6 is pretty solid. 5 to 6. I think this does help. Obviously not the best here. We do have a very good one on this map, according to this projection, but definitely will help for the most part. Now let's head to our next next candidate. This is Representative Val Demings of Florida. Now, for those of you who might not know, here's some context. Val Demings is an African-American representative from the state of Florida, and she formerly served as the Miami police chief in, I don't remember the time period, but it was pretty recent before she was elected to the House of Representatives in 2016. She's considered to be relatively charismatic and a good speaker. Let's look at this map here. Again, no surprise, Florida, Georgia, getting that African-American vote out definitely will help. Same with South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia. Yes. Now, does Joe Biden, again, does he need help winning? I mean, he obviously needs help winning these states, but does he need someone that can kind of get the African-American vote out there? I don't really think so, because, again, he is very good at getting these people out to vote. We saw that in the South Carolina primary and overall. However, a little boost will help him. So again, Georgia is a lean, likely state. Will Joe Biden at the end of the day carry the state of Georgia in this election? In my opinion, no. I think maybe the next few years, but this is definitely not the year for that to happen. And I'll talk about African-American women choices. There's kind of been a lot of people that want that to happen after, the Black Lives Matter protests. A lot of people kind of want an African-American chosen, a person of color. So she will definitely help in that southern region. That's very important. Florida is very important to Joe Biden. If he can lock in those 29 electoral votes, he won't need to win Arizona. He won't need to win Wisconsin to cover that, because Florida's 29, Wisconsin, Arizona, that's 21. Wisconsin is the most likely blue wall state to go to Donald Trump. But if he can secure Florida, that would be great for his campaign. Now, the state of North Carolina, this was also really close as well. This is a tilt. If he chooses Val Demings, it will get that African-American vote out there. North Carolina is another state where we have a lot of African-American votes. If he can get even more of those out there, it will be very beneficial. If we remember in 2008, I said it again, the second video in a row, but in 2008, Barack Obama was able to carry the state of North Carolina. Very important to his campaign, 11 electoral votes.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, 13 electoral votes. But it's still very, very important. Now, what's interesting is Val Demings doesn't perform well in Minnesota and in Wisconsin. These two states are pretty important to the Biden campaign as well, but this spread is moderately red as well. That's pretty deep red. To a point, I think he can take some losses in Minnesota. I think he might have a solid enough lead there to win the state. Wisconsin might be a little bit different, considering how close it is.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty interesting to think about.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch upon the East Coast here. You see, actually, quite a few states are being hurt if Val Demings becomes the VP. I just think this is just merely name recognition, and popularity. Up there in the East Coast, I don't think lots of people, except people who are into these things, I don't think they've really heard of Val Demings. There are like hundreds of miles apart, so I think that popularity factor is going to hurt the states in the East Coast.
Right, and that is one of the two main issues of Val Demings. The first issue being name recognition. She's not that well known in Florida, and obviously she's not well known in her own home state. She's obviously not going to be well known in the whole country. The second issue is experience. She is not the most inexperienced person on this list. That's the next person. But she is still pretty inexperienced, a two-term representative. The last time a representative was chosen was 2012. Future Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan. But again, usually we have more higher up people, a senator, a governor. Again, according to my tiers, House of Representatives is, if you're representative, that's kind of the middle low tier. So inexperience might be an issue, especially considering she's only been serving for 2 terms. If she served for like 10 terms, obviously that will be a bit better, but she does have experience being the police chief, but that's not really elected experience. Those are the 2 main issues. On a scale of 1 to 10, Eric, what would you give this one?
I think it's kind of a 50-50 here, maybe a bit more, maybe a 5.5 to a 6 range. She does carry the South, not carry, but she does help the South a lot. She does help Texas, but the blue wall area in the East Coast is being significantly hurt. So that's pretty dead middle. Yeah, 5.5, I would give this.
I would actually give this one a 6.5. Better than Kamala Harris. And the reason is because of the South. The South is all important. We look back at the Kamala Harris map, she's not really helping that much in the South as Val Demings is. But then we got to take into account the blue wall. She is kind of not really helping the blue wall either. So it is kind of debatable, 6 to 6.5. Eric, how about you take over our next candidate, Stacey Abrams of Georgia.
Yep. Lucas said it. Stacey Abrams is from Georgia. She did try to run for governor here. She did lose. We kept saying how the problem with her is how she's just not experienced enough. She does bring out a few good ideas that are supported, but people fear that she's just not going to be experienced enough. And if Joe Biden opts out of the next election, if he wins, Stacey Abrams would just not be fit to run for president. That would be way too huge of a jump for her. But let's talk about this map. Georgia, of course, is being helped here because of her being from Georgia. Surprisingly, the states to the west of her, Alabama, that's not being that helped much either. Well, Alabama is fairly safe, but it's actually very safe. It's solid red, so it's not even helping a bit. Florida is being helped. There are some African Americans, Florida, and Hispanics that would support an African American vice presidential candidate. And going up north, South Carolina and North Carolina and Virginia are all being helped if Stacey Abrams wins. And almost the same problem, not as severe though, with Val Demings. Bit of the East Coast is being harmed here. Maybe that's just because, again, maybe they want someone more desirable like Elizabeth Warren, or they just have not really gotten familiar with Stacey Abrams a lot if they didn't just follow her route to her governor elections or other small political elections.
Right.
Yeah. And one more thing, Minnesota is being harmed here. Maybe that's just the experience factor and popularity factor.
Something different between Stacey Abrams and Val Demings is that Stacey Abrams does have a fair amount of name recognition. She ran for governor in 2018 against Brian Kemp. She's well known in her state, but I'm kind of surprised that she's not helping more in her state. Maybe it is that experience factor that's affecting it. She will draw on those African-American Hispanic voters. And honestly, with the exception of New Hampshire, I don't think the Northeast really matters that much to any of these Democratic candidates, because either way, the Democrats should be able to win it, except for the state of Maine and New Hampshire. If they're getting harmed by a lot, that is going to pose some issues. But other than that, this is a pretty average map. I would give this one a 5 out of 10. How about you, Eric?
Me too. 4.5 to 5 seems reasonable to me. I'm surprised how she wasn't able to help as many states, just even a little bit, that are right around hers.
Absolutely. And now we're going to head to our final candidate, Elizabeth Warren. I was pretty shocked when I first saw this map.
Yep.
That is very, very...
Refocus your eyes, people.
I don't even think... Wow. This is... Now, here's some background on Elizabeth Warren. She is a progressive, and unlike Joe Biden, she is a progressive. Mm-hmm. Essentially, the main argument for why people want her to be chosen is if she is chosen, she will unite the Democratic Party, both the progressive wing and the moderate wing. Mm-hmm. Joe Biden has said, yep.
Sorry, something also to add, Warren is a senator from Massachusetts, and we're going to talk about how that is very much impacted, unlike lots of the other vice presidential candidates. Okay, you can continue. Right.
So, actually, there was a poll that came out. Most Americans, or most Democrats, I should say, want Elizabeth Warren on the ticket. This is the exact same thing that happened in 2016, but obviously she wasn't chosen. Elizabeth Warren, yes, again, very progressive, unites the Democratic Party, and unlike Joe Biden, she can get those young voters. Now, another issue that she has, however, the hardcore Bernie supporters, they don't really like her that much. Would that pose an issue? I'm not sure, because then again, many progressives are voting for Howie Hawkins of the Green Party. So it could pose an issue for Joe Biden. So let's start discussing each state here now. Blue wall, she helps a lot. This is very dark blue. A lot of help in the Midwest. Now, also, we have the state of Texas. A lot of Hispanic young voters here. Also, helping Joe Biden with Elizabeth Warren. Mm-hmm. Colorado, Arizona. This is very, very much needed. Again, a lot of Hispanic voters here. And I realized there was another issue with Elizabeth Warren being chosen. Most people want a person of color as the nominee.
Also, a younger person. Elizabeth Warren is 70.
Yeah. That is definitely a huge issue going forward for Joe Biden. Again, if he decides to not run for a second term, we don't know if Elizabeth Warren would be like kind of the right age range for that in the future. Anyway, she helps in states like Georgia, a lot of African Americans. Same with North Carolina, also having a lot of African Americans. I just want to double check. I think this might actually be deeper blue than both Val Demings and Stacey Abrams. Yes, it is actually. In fact, all of these states are more deep blue than all the other states.
Yeah, and Florida as well. So basically, to sum it up here, she's helping all the battleground states.
Right.
And that's gonna definitely push Biden over the edge. Not probably. That could definitely push him over the edge.
Definitely the Northeast as well. We see Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, deep blue. Same with Maine. Joe Biden needs those voters in New Hampshire and Vermont and Maine if he wants to secure the presidency. Something important to note, though. The chance of Elizabeth Warren being chosen is pretty unlikely. And the reason is because Joe Biden has made a statement already saying he would rather choose someone that aligns with his views. Obviously, Elizabeth Warren does not align with his views. So that a possibility of her being chosen is relatively low at the moment. So obviously a lot of help here. Eric, what would you give this map?
I'd give it a 9 because just look. Blue wall secured, battleground states secured, Northeast secured. I mean, although in reality, on paper, this is great for Joe Biden, but in reality, views do not align. So, and he did make a statement about what he does prefer. So, on paper, it's a 9, but I'm not sure, like you said, that it can become a reality.
Right, and I think it's important to note that the states that she's hurting him in are solid Republican states, or in this case of Delaware, a solid Democratic state. That does not really affect Joe Biden. It doesn't really matter if he's not winning in, like, North Dakota, because that's probably going to go to the Republican anyway. And with that being said, I actually give this one a 9.5, actually.
Mhm.
And honestly, maybe even a 10, 9.5 to 10, because this really is helping Joe Biden's case. But obviously, this likely won't happen. But according to the statistics, Elizabeth Warren is the best running mate for Joe Biden at the moment. Now, another point to make is that Elizabeth Warren has little to no baggage. The baggage that Kamala Harris has as Attorney General, the baggage that Amy Klobuchar now has, completely kind of
Destroyed her, opportunity.
Didn't destroy Kamala Harris, but it completely destroyed Amy Klobuchar. She just has very little baggage here, Elizabeth Warren, which is another reason why she might be best for Joe Biden. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching this video. If you like this video, please hit the like button. And if you like our content, please subscribe. We'll see you in our next episode tomorrow.
See ya.